Through 5 games, the San Antonio Spurs are 3-2 after suffering a 134-122 loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Let's go through a breakdown of this game on Wednesday that the Spurs played again in Minnesota, second game in a row. We do want to note, though, as you see here on the box score, that Devin Vassell was out due to injury, and so was Josh Primo. So the Spurs were missing two of their key rotation players in this game. So let's first, before we go into leading scores, let's kind of go through a quick summary of how this game went about. In the first quarter, the Minnesota won the first quarter by 11 points. I do want to note from the first quarter that Jeremy Sohan is a player to watch there. He ended up with making his first 2 NBA threes there in the first quarter. So he got 6 of his 12 points from the 3-point line. We kind of, not we, but Anthony Edwards, should I say, showed us the viewers, what was going to happen in this game. But just by his first quarter for performance, when he made 4 3-pointers in that first quarter, he ends up with 7 made threes, 21 points from the 3-point line, and a game high 34 points after he had a very quiet night on Monday against the Spurs. So he really bounced back there with 34 points in the second quarter. Minnesota kind of took the lead there. They went into halftime by 15 points. In the third quarter, the Spurs really competed. They played much better half-court defense. Their defensive activity was a lot higher in that third quarter. Keldon Johnson got going as well in the second half. And so they were only down by 8 going into the fourth. But then in the fourth, Minnesota came out early with the quick run. I think it was like 8-2 or 10-4. And then they kind of kept that separation. By the 6-minute mark, they were by 12. The Spurs would kind of get within like 7-8 points. But Minnesota continued. They ended up winning this game, as you see here, by 12 points. So let's talk about the leading scorers in this game. First for the Spurs, it was Keldon Johnson. Again, he mainly got hot there in the second half, using attacking the rim, 8 points. Then he had his 3-ball going. Doug McDermott off the bench with 19 points for San Antonio, mainly from the 3-point line, 12 of his points from the 3-point line. Bates-Diop with a strong game there, especially in the second quarter. We had 12 of his 15 points attacking the paint. Trey Jones, 13 points, and then he made a corner three in this game, and he also went 6 of 6 from the free throw line. Sohan ends up with another double-digit scoring game, 12 points, and then Jakob Poeltl with 10 of his 12 points in the paint. And Josh Richardson, started for Devin Vassell being out, and he ends up with 11 points, 9 points from the 3-point line. As far as Minnesota, they had 4 players score 20 or more points. So like I mentioned, Ant ends up with 34 points. Jalen Noel is a player to watch for Minnesota because, he had a strong game, 23 points. He scored from every area on the floor, and he's actually going to be an unrestricted free agent. So the Wolves do as bird rights. But again, that's a player to watch whenever this coming summer comes up. If he continues to play like this. Cat has 21, and then Jaden McDaniels ends up with 20 for the Wolves. Okay. And so the biggest thing here is, and we're going to break this down a little bit more, is the 3-point scoring. The Spurs lost the 3-point line by 12 points, but Minnesota, when you see these percentages, they're wild. So it's tough. Even Coach Pop said that, when a team makes 23s, it's tough to stop it. All right, as far as the standout players for the Spurs, when we just again look at the raw box score numbers, Josh Richardson tops out here in this model. He ends up with a double-double. Josh Richardson is a starting 2 with 11 points and then 10 assists there. That's what really picked up his number. Keldon, like I mentioned, goes for 27 points. He also had 3 assists, 3 turnovers, 4 rebounds. Jakob Poeltl, 12 points, 10 rebounds, another double-double for Jakob, 4 assists, 2 turnovers. Trey Jones, 13 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and then Doug McDermott again off the bench with a strong game with 19 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds. Okay, so those are some of the standout players. So here's where we get into the numbers with the shot location. I mean, it's really tough. This is something I mentioned, like Pop mentioned. It's tough to beat a team when they're going to shoot like lights out. I mean, this is literally lights out here. 65% overall from the floor for Minnesota. In the paint, 68%. From the 3-point line, they make 23s and they shoot them so well. They made 59% of those threes. And then even look at the mid-range. I mean, 5 of 6. Their worst shooting area was from the free throw line of all places, the place where you're supposed to have a calm area right there shooting free throws. They won the battle on the 2s. They won the battle on the 3s. The Spurs though did win the free throw line battle against Minnesota. But again, when a team shoots that well on a night, it's going to be very tough. You have to be almost perfect on all the other ends of the court, and that was tough for San Antonio being without 2 players. But they did compete. It wasn't like it was a huge blowout in this game. As far as the Spurs, without Devin and Primo there, 2 of their players who do attack the defense, they did struggle to finish in the paint against Rudy Gobert. So they ended up with 46% paint accuracy, which is a season low for them. They did shoot well again from 3, 44%. They make their threes. They made 16, but again, it wasn't enough to match Minnesota's. And then the free throw line, they had their best shooting night from the free throw line, 91% accuracy for the Spurs. And then one thing we want to notice is the fast break scoring. They went from 24 points in that first game against Minnesota to now just 6 points. And a key reason for that, Bill Land and Sean Elliott mentioned this in the broadcast, is the fact that when a team's shooting 65%, I mean, they're not missing a lot. So in order to get that fast break scoring going, you need the team to miss the opponent, and then you got to get the rebound and go, head down in the fast break. And so Minnesota, that was definitely a priority for them. Their head coach mentioned that, Chris Finch, after the game, that was a priority to increase or to improve their transition defense. And we see that there. But again, when because of how their offense shot Minnesota, that really took away any kind of chances for the Spurs to get out and run. So now when we look at the Spurs through 5 games, what stuck out tonight, some individual stats for their overall team. First, let's look at the good on offense. Again, 91% free throw accuracy was a season high. They also ended up with their third 30 assist night. They had 34 assists on 43 makes, which equals a 79% assist percentage, which is another season high for this team. And again, they were without Vassell and without Josh Primo, 2 of their players who handled the ball a lot on this team. The bad where they struggled is something that I mentioned last time was whenever they had won the 3-point line against their opponents, they were 3-0. Well, now whenever they lose the 3-point line so far through 5 games, they're 0-2. And this usually is a trend with this team, is that when they win the 3-point line, they have much more success than when they lose the 3-point line. As far as, like I mentioned earlier, their paint accuracy was a season low, and then also the fast break scoring. We went into details about why that happened. And then as far as what stood on defense, I mean, it was just really Minnesota shooting from 3, again, 59% accuracy for 60 points from the 3-point line. And then that should say Minnesota. I don't know why it says MIB. Shooting in the paint, they had 68% accuracy. That is also a season high for a Spurs opponent. Up next is against Chicago. The Spurs finally return home against the Bulls, and that'll be on Friday. And again, for the Spurs, I know they lost this game. They were without 2 of their players. They did go down by 17, but like I said, they competed, and in that fourth quarter, it wasn't close, but again, they were hovering within 8 to 10 points, and it wasn't like a total blowout. But again, San Antonio never quite got to crunch time. But this was a good road trip for the Spurs. They ended up going 3-1 on this road trip, and now going back home through 5 games of the season, they now have a 3-2 record. So for Project Spurs, I am Paul Garcia.